Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this week for this episode of Demystifying Money. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and today I'm talking with Kim Miles. She is the founder and CEO of Miles and Heels Productions. And we're going to talk today about a lot of things, including, visibility, ways that you can grow your business, and really the power of networking, especially for, as we're nearing, we have a new year coming. I think a lot of us maybe are feeling a little bit worn out from the past year. Maybe we're not really sure, trying to figure out the sense of direction going forward. So I think that, and maybe you haven't done much networking, or you've kind of stopped networking after COVID, and now you're thinking about bringing that back into your business plan. So I wanted to talk with Kim today because she's done a great job not only finding networks, but really building ones when there wasn't one naturally that was there for her that she was looking for. So Kim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
So you've had quite a journey. You are a financial advisor, and you're also now you've launched this, very interesting production company, Miles and Heels. What's been the driving force for you behind making some of these bolder career moves?
Well, I really attribute it to when I launched the company 11 years ago. I've been a financial advisor for 22 years. And so the long story short is that when I had moved back to Boston, I was actually really looking to build my financial advisory practice. And so I went to the Chamber of Commerce and I said, what do you have specifically for women in business? And they said, well, we used to have something, but we don't really have anything anymore. And being the kind of person that I am, I said, well, I'll fix that. So I started a group that was really predominantly supposed to be a support networking group for women. And what it quickly morphed into was that I actually ended up both producing and emceeing the largest fundraiser for the Chamber of Commerce. And I ended up doing that on a volunteer basis for 10 years. And I ended up raising the Chamber over $100,000. And then all of a sudden, it sort of dawned on me that, I had this talent that I should be sharing and could be sharing with other institutions. And so that's how Miles and Heels Productions was actually born. So that fundraiser became the largest and most successful fundraiser that the Chamber had ever seen. And so that I just really took that skill set, that innate skill set that I had, and I formed my own company under my own moniker. And then I was able to market myself successfully through my network, through the power of my networking, and all of the skills that I've learned through my financial advisory practice. And I've been able to share those skills as my event strategy practice has grown with all different types of clients, from nonprofits to law firms to individual entrepreneurs. And so for the past 11 years, I've really run my two businesses side by side. And I really do attribute the success of both of them to my power of networking, my prowess in networking, and really my belief in the fact that networking is everything and that your network truly is your net worth.
Yeah. No, and it sounds like the company kind of was born organic. Like you just, you were working with the chamber, and then you successfully like helped them raise all this. So it definitely seems like things kind of fell into place naturally for you, which is really an exciting, it's interesting because I think a lot of times maybe we are good at something or we do something, but we don't listen to that little voice that thinks this could potentially be something bigger.
I
Did
think
you
that's a
notice
really good,
that when you were?
that's a huge point. I mean, this for me, this was organic. I think that you
Yeah.
raised a really good point. This was very organic for me, but I think what you raise is an incredible point, especially for women. Women are a little bit more hesitant to leap before they look, and I've always been a little bit of a leap before you look person.
Yeah.
I had this idea. I was thinking it was pretty bold to think, it was working for one entity.
Yeah.
Now I want it to work for all entities. But that belief in myself, again, and in the power in my network, and I really said, I really took the old adage that my father and mother have always said to me, which is, you never know until you try.
Yeah.
And so it was the best decision I ever made. It has morphed over the years. It has changed and grown, and I've pivoted over the years. But I really do attribute that to having the belief in myself. I wish more women would have that belief in themselves to
Mhm.
say, I have a kernel of something here, and could I try it? Could it be successful?
Mhm.
Um, so I agree with you. A little bit of it is, just having to rip off the Band-Aid and seeing if you can move forward with it and believing in yourself to do so.
Yeah, no, I do. And I think a lot of women, or maybe they're doing a lot of volunteer work or they're doing something like that, and they're actually helping organizations level up or they're bringing things to another level. But I wonder, and I think that maybe our experience in finance has helped us be able to make bigger moves because we look at the numbers and we look at the math as well.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I think
And
that's
and
so
I think,
important.
for me, a lot of times people, they'll when they're speaking to me, they're like, "Oh, so you're an event planner." And I correct them and I say, "No, I'm an event strategist."
Mm,
And that title, I came up with it for myself by myself because I'm not an event planner in the respect that I am, the one who's providing the linens and the light fixtures and the ice sculptures. I hire the event planners to do that, to make my clients' events incredibly successful and beautiful. But I'm an event strategist because what I'm doing is I'm melding both, I'm taking both sides of my brain and I'm using them equally, right? I'm paying attention to all the business acumen that goes into a successful event, the margins, the fundraising, the profitability, everything that you're talking about. And then I'm using the other side of my brain, which is really the creative side. And I'm a creative at heart.
mhm.
And so I'm talking about the branding, the messaging, what the audience wants to get out of it. So fusing those two intersection at an intersection with both areas of my brain is what really makes me a unicorn in the business. And people seek me out because they don't just need it to be pretty or fun. They need it to be successful and pretty and fun.
Well, and
So
I think it's an
that's huge.
interesting, as far as event planning and event strategists, because I think a lot of businesses can put a lot of money into events, hire a good event planner, and have it not add a dime to the bottom line,
That's
or just
correct.
be an expensive way to. So I really do think that there's a lot of power behind events, but also I think that it has to be strategic because they can be pretty expensive as far as when businesses are thinking about that. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd love, because you mentioned being a strategist, to really maybe we could dive in for a moment just about how we do use events or kind of create a business strategy around, getting visibility to your business, but also how to make them, how does somebody determine if this is a good business opportunity for them to start to maybe get in front of or bring in their ideal clients?
That's a great question. So, what I find on the event side of my practice, I mean, I do a lot of different things. And when
Hmm.
people research me, they'll see that I wear a lot of different hats. But on the event side of my practice, specializing in live, hybrid, or virtual events, because with COVID, we all had to learn how to do that, obviously. But with the event side of my practice, I think that what's so important is that people are coming to me as clients in one of two capacities. One, they've been running an event that they've been running for years, and they've seen that their profitability or their margins have really decreased or that their audience has fallen off. Number one. So they need me to come in and sort of, zhuzh it up and
Yeah.
really resuscitate it so that it becomes, to your point, successful, not just pretty and fun to be at, but successful to the bottom line. That it serves a purpose, right? That it serves a purpose. People are leaving there thinking I'm better off than when I came in. The other type of client comes to me with a kernel of an idea, back to what we were talking about at the top of the hour,
Mhm.
with a kernel of an idea, and they're saying, I don't know how to get from ideation to execution. That's my sweet spot, right? That's what I'm the expert in. I'm the expert in helping my clients, corporations, institutions, nonprofits, or entrepreneurs get from ideation to execution. Because there's a long way from A to Z
Yeah.
and all those steps in between. And so, to your question, how does one decide if this is going to be, you know, is going to be the right fit, and is it going to be a good strategic move? And I think that part of that is in the process of really answering the singular question of why.
Yeah.
Why is it that you want to do this or think that you need to do this? What is the end game? Is it more users? Is it more clients? Is it more visibility? Is it more money? Is it more, whatever it is?
Hmm.
Is it a new brand? Do you just need recognition? Do you need to play in your space? So I think that it all comes down to making sure that we can fully answer the question, why are we doing this? And then along the way, from ideation to execution, are we always making decisions that go back to answering that question, why? Don't make a decision just because. It has to support your why.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where people kind of fall off. I think that they fall off the rails. They're doing things because they think it's trendy or fun. But is it going back to the to why we answered your why?
No, that's so important because I think a lot of us, we do see the events online or we see what other people maybe in our field are doing. And I think what you mentioned before about your brand or your how how important it is to kind of understand what that is before you do something like try to host these events where maybe you not might not get the same audience as somebody else, or maybe it wouldn't be, it would feel, it wouldn't necessarily work. Like I think in our field of for finance, there's a lot of steak dinners. A lot of people are invited to these
Oh,
big
the dreaded
events
steak
all
dinner.
the time, all the steak dinners. And I mean, for me, that's just not ever going to be a part of it. But I could see seeing, I get these in the mail. Maybe this is what I should do. This is what I should do. And
Right.
really not having that clear understanding of like the audience and the why. So I think
Yeah.
that's such an important part that you help with
Yeah,
because
and I think that, the audience, if the decisions that you're making aren't supporting or speaking to your audience, then you're already starting off on the wrong foot, right?
Mhm.
So every decision that we're making, whether it's, the type of sponsorship packages that we're offering or the way that we're branding and messaging it, I'm a one-stop shop when it comes to event strategy. I'm looking at all the angles, all of them, because they're all interconnected.
Mhm.
And like I just said, every decision that you're making has to support that why. So if you're not getting the right, butts in seats, as I always say, if you're not getting the right people in the seats, then you've missed the mark somewhere. And so I think one of the other things that's really challenging for people is sometimes they're too close to their own cause. When people launch their baby, they're too close to their own cause. They might be too close to their own brand or their own product or whatever it is. And it really does take an outsider to sometimes play devil's advocate and ask the hard questions. And I really pride myself on that because sometimes I have to be the one that says no. Like I really just don't think that
Mhm.
that's great decision for. I know that you've been doing that for 20 years, but doesn't mean that just because you've always been doing it that you should continue to do it. I mean, as we like to say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I think when it comes to my clients, I think that they're grateful to have sort of this outside voice that's
Mm.
saying, wow, I never really thought of it that way. I'm looking at it as an outsider. I'm looking at it as a potential client or customer. And so I'm thinking, what do I want to hear? What do I want to feel when I walk in the room or walk away from that room? And so that's what I think I'm bringing that to the table, that angle that sometimes they can be too close to it.
Yeah. No, and I think that there's potentially a lot of people who, like you said, they're either too close to their business or maybe it's more of a formal traditional business. And what are some of the ways that you can kind of bring that creativity in? Because like you said, some people might think they need to do this, but they have no idea really how to execute or how to even create an event that maybe we want to deliver the education. We want to make sure people learn something and people don't want to necessarily spend their time somewhere when time is precious. So how do you bring in that creativity and that fun?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm always paying attention to trends, that's for
Mm,
sure, because you have to be on point, you have to be on trend. You don't want to introduce something that was 5 years ago happy
yeah.
and 5 years ago popular. But I call it trendy for a purpose. Is it bringing something to the table, not just for the sake of the trend,
Mhm.
because then those can fall a little flat. But I do love to use the example. I work with a lot of attorneys and a lot of
Mhm.
attorneys organizations, and I love working with them because they are incredible practitioners, but they also tend to come from, to your point, a more conservative
Mhm.
landscape or a more conservative industry. And so they're really eager and excited to do things that are more kind of to be more fund up. And so we've had a great time with really experimenting with different things at our events that, are bringing just a little element of fun. And the feedback has been, wow, this was refreshing, or I've never seen this before, or excuse me, or, that was it was a fun night. I had fun. I met people and, the speakers were great, but I also had fun. And it was just great to kind of like let my shoulders down for an evening and just kind of, be a little bit whimsical for a while. So I think that healthy balance of does it serve a purpose, but is it also going to leave your clients or your attendees wanting more? My goal is always to have my attendees leave and say, wow, that was new. That was fresh. I've not actually been to an event quite like that before. So that's always my goal.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a lot different than being like, am I going to get continuing education credits for this? Where do I sign the piece of paper? You're not feeling like it was maybe incredibly fun, but you're like, I've got
Exactly.
something
Yes.
here. because,
Yes.
a lot of the people that you work with that I work are very, very busy. So kind of attracting them and getting them to maybe commit to coming to something that's after work hours or that would require some of their time. I think that it's really smart that you're focusing on those trends because there might be something like a virtual like happy hour that I might not be that interested in going to anymore. Maybe a couple of years ago, but I don't know. Like I
Yeah,
feel like
well,
the
that's a
trends are
great point.
changing.
The virtual pivot was a really interesting learning experience. I learned so much in such a short period of time because I had
Yeah.
no choice. I mean, I had to.
Mhm.
But it was such a great learning experience. And man, I mean, I've learned so much about what you can offer. And there are so many companies that have so many individuals all over the world that they need to have a hybrid option available to them. The key is having a hybrid option that's attractive,
Yeah.
that makes somebody want to tune in halfway around the world in a completely different time zone. So, in a way, I wish COVID never happened, but in a way, I will tell you that there have been a couple of really great things that have come out of COVID. The
Mhm.
fact that you and I are doing this right now over Zoom is like a great thing that came out of COVID.
Mhm.
So, there are some benefits. I always try to find positives out of negatives, and there have been some positives out of COVID for sure.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think starting this podcast when I first left corporate really was to meet people because networking had kind of been crushed.
Yeah.
Going to the meetings, there were some virtual things that were starting to pop up, but it really helped me meet people.
Well,
Much
if I
more.
might just add, if I might add to that, in terms of networking, the power of networking, one of the things that I'm actually really proud of, and I'm actually hired to come in and teach is a curriculum on networking.
Mm,
Because as a financial advisor, as you well know, and as I well know, like if you are not constantly networking and promoting yourself proudly and appropriately, your network is not going to grow in terms of the clients that you're going to be referred to, et cetera, et
mhm,
cetera. So I actually teach people, I speak at a lot of conferences and they hire me to teach my networking curriculum because I think it's the singular most important skill that you can have.
mhm,
Almost more important for women than it is for men. For some reason, men are just most men. I don't want to do blanket statements
mhm,
because that's kind of obnoxious, but most men have a little bit easier time with that. Women really, really struggle. And so I love the curriculum that I'm able to come out and kind of put forth to the world. I've done it virtually, I've done it in
mhm.
person. But to your point, the networking that kind of fell off the map, you had to relearn how to
Yeah,
network.
it
You had
was
to
totally
relearn how to
different.
network virtually, and then you had to remember how to go back into a room and do it in the
Mhm.
room again. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that you had to remember how to do, but you can't let it go because it's the most important skill that you need to have.
I think it's interesting, and I agree. I think it is somewhat different for men and women because even the traditional ways of networking that I was taught when I first became financial advisor about getting better at golf and all those things. I do like golf, but I can't tell you how many clients I've gotten from networking on a golf course, like zero.
Right.
I have a couple
Right.
of friends that are real estate agents that we could play occasionally. It was not the same. Even the
Yeah.
times have changed as far as how busy people are, where maybe that's not where you're going to find busy exactly because it's just a different world. So I feel like networking, like you mentioned, it goes through certain evolutions
Well, I
where
think everything goes through an evolution.
yeah.
Everything has a natural maturation, right?
Mhm,
I mean, I also think this is something really important that I've been giving a lot of personal thought to, and
mhm,
I don't know if we're contemporaries in age, we're probably in the same zone, right? But in your 20s, different things are important to you in the work world than in your 30s, 40s, and 50s,
mhm,
right? So I'm in my 50s.
mhm,
And, my work world is not necessarily providing me also with my social life, right? I'm married, I
mhm,
don't have children, but I also am an established person in my community with my friends and with this and that. So, but when you're 20 and you're 30, I mean, I lived in Manhattan in my 20s and 30s. And so
mhm,
my job was sort of the center of my universe in terms of my social life and the happy hours and the outings and the this, and you didn't want to miss anything for a minute because like that was but I think that to your point, everything goes through a maturation. Everything has its cycle, its chapter. Some of my best friends that I've met through work. How many spouses meet through work? I mean, work is a central part of your
mhm,
life, but it goes through phases as to how it serves you. And so networking in person, every once in a while, I really do. I rip off the band-aid and I like force myself to
mhm,
go to an in-person networking event just to really, sort of get the cobwebs off or to
mhm,
kind of like, because I always say to people, if you meet one great connection, then it was a success, right?
Yes.
One great connection.
Absolutely.
You
Hmm.
don't have to go in there and get 500 business cards. That is not the right way to network. That's not even networking. That's
Yeah.
just collecting business cards, you know?
Right.
So it's like if you go to something and I walk away from that, I'm like, oh, I met a really cool person, mission accomplished.
I agree. I think that's something that, and you're right. Maybe a lot of women, maybe this is new to us. Maybe they're not used to, maybe their mom wasn't out networking or going to any events or anything like that. I know my mom certainly wasn't. And I think that it is something where sometimes we feel like we have to be perfect in order to show up. And I've seen this before, even with people commenting on being on video or sharing, communicating anything with their brand. And I know that you're I will recognize you if I see you tomorrow. Like you talk about your shoes, you talk about certain things with your branding, and you've put yourself out there on a TED Talk. You've done certain things that I think a lot of people feel very, very anxious about and nervous. So tell me a little bit more about kind of the strategy behind some of the being recognizable, being visible, how that served you, and kind of if that didn't feel natural, how did you kind of get comfortable with that awkwardness?
I love that question because I always say that the single best compliment that I always get when people meet me is they meet me, they recognize me, right? And they say to me, "You're the one with the shoes." And then they meet me and they say, "You are exactly as you put yourself out on social media into the world. Your website is exactly your personality, your voice. I can hear your voice when you write. I do a lot of writing and a lot of newsletters and, or the videos that I put out there. When people meet me in person, you're not getting two different personalities. Even in my financial advisory practice, this is the personality you're getting. This is what God gave me. This has made me very successful. I don't hide it for anybody. This is who I am. And so it's not like you're getting one version of me here and another version of me here, or one version of me in social media and another version of me in person. I think the worst thing you can do, right? If you've ever been a sucker for social media influencing, and I certainly have been,
Mhm.
if you fall in love with a brand online, you get the product and you are just incredibly disappointed by that product. It is nothing like it purported itself to be online. So I feel that the singular most complimentary thing anybody ever says to me is like, you are exactly as I thought you would be, as I read you to be, as I felt you to be. And what that speaks to is that when you are true and authentic to yourself, whatever level that may be, I might be in a level 11 for you. And maybe that's too much, and that's okay. Maybe I'm not your jam, and that's fine. If you're level 5, if you're level 8, if you're level 11, just be that level, but
Mhm.
just be it consistently. Don't try to be something you're not. Don't go into a networking event pretending or dressing like you would never dress in real life or speak with an affect that you would never be with in real life,
Mhm.
and then expect people to want to work with you. And then they meet you and they're like, you're not at all what I met.
Mhm.
That just makes no sense. So I believe just being truly authentic to yourself is the number one way for you to like actually live your success, if that makes sense. By me doing what I do best, I know what I'm great at, and I know equally what I'm not good at. And I know enough to outsource those things that I'm not good at to concentrate on what I am good at. And then just staying true to those tenets.
I think that's it's such a smart point. And I think it's good that you mentioned that authenticity because I think a lot of times people will say, but I'm not this or I'm not an extrovert. I can't do that. And I
Right.
don't think that that's necessarily, I'm not particularly, I tend to calm people down when they talk to me. So I can take people who are
I
here
can see that. You're
and
very
bring
calming.
them here. And so that might not be what somebody wants, or they might see somebody that like they want to, energize them, depending on what they do. But I don't think that there's not a place for all of that.
Well,
So,
there's a million people in the world. Like, just go find your people. I mean, what I love about this conversation is that you and I are both financial advisors, but I can guarantee you that we probably don't focus on the same things, have the same kinds of conversations, or approach it in the same way. We probably have the same similar training,
mhm.
and we could probably have a really healthy, lovely conversation about it. But the way that I engage with my clients is probably very unique to the way that you engage with your clients.
Yeah.
That's what makes the world go round. How many times, Misty, have you had a client that has come to you, perhaps after they've worked with another advisor, and they've said something to you along the lines of, well, I was working with this advisor, but I wasn't so comfortable, or I didn't feel like I could ask the questions, or I couldn't emote in front of them, or whatever it is. then they find you and they find their person.
Yeah.
So there's a person for everybody. I don't care if it's financial advising or event strategy, whatever it is, find the person that gels with you and run with it, because that's when you know that you're going to have success.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's really powerful with what you do with helping people kind of build that strategy. Because, like you said, there was only one time one person came in my office and was like, you know, you're not that like slick. And they were eating my candy dish in my little office and in my very cozy office. And I was like, what online? Like, where did you come to expect it? Unless it was really just the designations that I had. And I was like, I can find you slick. I will find you. But I was like, I don't, but it was funny because I'm like, oh, that's so funny because so many people must just self-select being like, that's my person or that's not my person. It saves us all time
Yeah, but
because this was just it was a crazy.
you just said something so important. You said, I'll find you somebody slick. Like, I'm not your gal. Like, don't try to, you didn't then try to become slick for that person.
No,
Like, good
no.
on you. Like, there's so
Yeah.
many women out there that would try to then fit themselves into that. Why
Mhm.
are you going to fit a round peg in a square hole? Like, that's the most inauthentic thing you could possibly do.
Right. And I think that's what keeps some people from being, so they're trying to fit all those different things. And then it's
Yeah.
not like I'd say, oh gosh, no, I'd rather like what you're looking for. If that is what you're looking for, like we'll
Right.
find it. But yeah, it's something that I think takes a little bit of reflection about who you want to be because take social media and like the branding photos and the pictures where sometimes I'll see people that do like a branding shoot that's all like pink and balloons and champagne, but that's not professionally them. It just looks really pretty.
It looks really pretty, but also it doesn't necessarily
Just a
reflect what
little
their actual
confusing.
profession is.
Yes.
Right. You're like,
Yeah.
you're like, I'm a surgeon, and like you're
Yeah.
not gonna have, like,
Right.
like popping bottles. I mean, like that's not the
Yeah.
surgeon I want cutting me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everything's got to make sense. I think people make decisions pretty quickly. I think even if we don't mean to, I think subconsciously we're making decisions all the time on like that feels off or
Yes.
not, or I want more of this or less. And so I think it's such an important thing to have that strategy. And you've built, I love your brand. My shoe collection is pathetic. But you've got you made yourself recognizable. You made yourself kind of stand out. And I think for those people, I talk to a lot of people who would love to do more speaking or they want to be a keynote speaker. So how has that part of your career evolved to not only just like know how to build a brand, but also to be like, I know how to be center stage and help an event move forward. Because I think there's a lot of people who would love to figure that out, but they're waiting for somebody to knock on the door and invite them. And
Well,
it's
that's never gonna happen. I'll just tell them that right there. I mean, that's never gonna happen. I mean, look, full transparency, I've been a performer all my life, so being on
okay,
stage is not foreign to
not
me.
scary.
It's not scary.
Mhm.
It's who I really am at my core. I'm a singer. I've done stand-up comedy. I sing in a band. I still have a band. I mean, like being on stage is not foreign to me,
Mhm.
but I fully recognize that for 99% of the population, it is foreign to them. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I never just say things like, "Oh yeah, just get up there, you'll be fine." Like I'm not that naive. I will tell you though that as somebody who doesn't get afraid or is not nervous to speak in front of large crowds or
Mhm.
small, it is my jam. It is what makes me a great educator also in my financial
Mhm.
advisory practice. But I will tell you that the scariest thing that I ever did was when I actually went for a TED Talk, and it happened completely accidentally, which was that I was actually speaking at a gig at Babson, and somebody raised their hand in the audience and asked me if I ever considered giving a TED Talk. And I literally guffawed out loud because I said I would be terrible at a TED Talk.
Mhm.
And then she then said to me, well, that's too bad because I actually run the TED Talk program here at Babson. I think you'd be great. And
Oh.
then I quickly pivoted and said, oh, I was just kidding. I'd be great at a TED Talk. And it was a funny moment. And I put my hat in the ring for a TED Talk and I was chosen. And it was the most terrifying thing that I have ever done. Now, that's coming from a seasoned speaking professional. So the moral of this story about my TEDx experience is that I was not thinking I would be good at it. didn't ever want to do it, and just did it anyway. So when people want to get into speaking, what I say to them is go sign up for something that terrifies you. I don't care if that's speaking at the local chamber of commerce, joining Toastmasters, just rip the band-aid off with one thing. Tape yourself, put your phone, record yourself so that you can see and feel and learn from it. Have somebody who is going to be honest with you in the audience to give you feedback. Rip that band-aid off, learn from your experience, and then sign up for things that scare you. Because if you don't push yourself, nobody's going to come
Yeah.
knock on your door.
Yeah. No,
Nobody.
I think it's interesting too that you mentioned that because you you're not uncomfortable speaking. So what was it about the TED Talk in particular that made that maybe a little bit more intimidating to you than a stand-up comedy routine?
Yeah, that's easy to answer because this is what was so terrifying to me. I am much more of an off the cuff ad lib person. I am great at crowd work. I feed off of the crowd. I've done stand up comedy. I sing in a band. I am working with the audience. It is an exchange of energy. Okay. A TED Talk is like the opposite.
Yeah.
It is scripted to the minute. You have to memorize it. Now, let me take it one step further. I was chosen to do a TED Talk in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. It was then delayed till 2021. I actually didn't even have a normal TED Talk experience. You're supposed to do a TED Talk in front of a live audience where I would have interaction with the
Yeah.
audience,
Hmm.
but I did it in a studio and it was recorded. So it was
Wow.
an even different experience. But again, the thing that terrified me the most was is that I am much more an off the cuff ad lib person.
Hmm.
And this was incredibly structured. You have to submit a script. And I was like, that terrified me. So I was like, I don't think I'll be good at that. And you know what?
Hmm.
I was great at
Yeah.
it.
No,
But it was terrifying. It was
it
terrifying.
was, yeah, it was great. I listened to it and you talked about some personal things. So I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing because it looks like, outwardly people might look at you and think like success, a natural. But can you tell us about some of the personal things that you've had to deal with, in your own life to, and how you've managed to not only, overcome them, but really kind of use them inside of your work to help more people.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It took me a long time to come to terms with a couple of things in my life. And when I did, it was very freeing. And that is at the base of my TED Talk. And obviously, I would love for people to go find my TED Talk.
Yeah,
That would
we'll
be
put that
great.
in the show notes for sure. It's
Thank
definitely.
you. But so I won't make it a complete spoiler, but I am both a cancer survivor and also somebody who struggled with infertility. And those two things really did shape the way that I treat adversity or struggle or patience or actually really having an attitude of if you don't try, you'll never know. And that really does come from my parents,
Mhm.
very specifically my father. And he was the one who encouraged me to go look into becoming a financial advisor. And I thought he was crazy. I'm like, have you met me? Like, I'm your only daughter. Like, I'm a creative person. I don't think that's a good fit. Here I am 22 years later. And so the whole heart of the TED Talk is really about the fact that all the different things in your life lead you, I believe, to where you're supposed to be. My struggle with infertility was something that was very, very hard for me to reconcile. And when I finally reconciled that I can have a really beautiful full life and not necessarily have children, and that's at the center of what a full life means, that was very freeing for me. I have an aunt who also is not married. I'm married, but my aunt is not married and doesn't have
Mhm.
children. And now I fully, fully understand the level of love that she has for me and my brother, on a different
Mhm.
playing field because it's the way that I feel about my six nieces.
Mhm.
Um, but just kind of reconciling me, my journey, and the fact that I can live a full, happy, productive, and incredibly a life that can also be very impactful to other people. And it doesn't have to center necessarily around whether or not I have children, biological or not.
Mhm.
So it was a process. It took many years for me to talk about the topic without breaking out into tears, but it gave me a source of strength. I'm proud of the way that I handled myself. I'm proud of the way that my husband and I handled ourselves. And I feel that I am a champion of child-free individuals. And I love to talk to people about it because when you share those burdens with other people, it can be very healing and very freeing. And if I can help just one person in that journey, I feel that I've really done my job.
Yeah, it's so it's interesting because I think the fact that, and everyone definitely go listen to her TED Talk, but we're all human. We're human. And so, even the people that you're looking like that look like everything is perfect and lovely all the time, or that they're happy all the time, like we are all sharing this human experience. And so I think it's important. And like you said, that can then shape the way that you think about, even, your own feel as a financial advisor. There's plenty of clients that, don't feel comfortable working with somebody who like looks down on them for like how they're, depending on their relationship status, they're child free if or not. So I think that it's really interesting to think about like, okay, this is like, who can I help? Like, who can hear you talk about your experience and maybe feel less alone? And I think that's what's important about being able to share your story, even if it's not a perfect, beautiful, happy ending all the time with, I talk
No, it
about, financial
rarely,
struggles.
it
And
rarely is. Yeah.
yeah, no,
I
and
mean,
I
there,
think,
that's a problem with social media, right? Everything
yeah.
looks so shiny and perfect,
Mhm.
and people are struggling silently all the time. We don't
All
know
the
what they're
time.
struggling with. And, one of the biggest messages in my talk is really we need to change the way that we approach conversations with other women because you know what? You don't know what my journey is. Did I miscarry that morning? Did I go through 10 rounds of IVF unsuccessfully? Don't lead with an assumption because it's not fair. It's not actually fair to both of us. It's certainly not fair to the person receiving
Mhm.
that who has struggled, but it's also not fair to the other person because you're starting off in at a point where it makes things awkward. There are so many other things in the world that we can talk about. Get to know the person first before you make an assumption. The worst thing you can do, and this happens to me on the daily, is when you meet somebody new and they say they lead with, how old are your children?
Mhm.
How many children do you have? Do our children know each other? You have started off on a presumptuous foot.
Mhm.
And I just don't think that that's fair to anybody. I
No.
don't care if you're presuming it about children or marriage or working or not, or straight or gay or red or blue or green, or I don't care what you're presuming. Don't start off with a presumption. It's unfair to both people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that that's something that a lot of people, maybe they don't mean to, but
They
they
don't.
haven't really thought about how they can do that. And so I think that it's so important to have a lot of, to even sometimes I'll ask people like, do you support anybody financially? And sometimes it's a very expensive cat. Sometimes it's mom. Sometimes it's this person. It doesn't like, there's a lot of different ways to kind of find out more about people without having to necessarily
That's right.
assume
That's right.
anything.
That's right.
But, it's one of those things that I think the more the more we share, the more authentic we are publicly, the more we try to, reach that right person who we do want to work with or connect with. I think that, just like you said, just being authentic. And yeah, sometimes it is important to share the not so pretty things either.
Well,
When,
we all learn from something when you share the non-pretty,
absolutely.
we all learn from each other. And that's what I think is glorious about women in networking.
Mhm.
I think that 90% of the people in the female community actually do want to help each other and lift each other up. I think it's
Okay.
it's really a lesser part of the population that is really looking to step over people and
Mhm.
be competitive about it. I think that that's what I love so much about women's groups and women's networking groups. You and I belong to some of
Mhm.
the same women's networking groups. I mean, I see your name all the time. And so when you reached out to me, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm like, I know who this person
Yeah.
is. And, like that's sort of like the beauty of it, right? And so I think that that's what's special about a community of women is that 90% of the time we're really looking to help each other out as opposed to kind of keeping each other down.
Yeah, no, I agree. I had a guest on the podcast and she was like, I'm so surprised you had me on the show. I'm a CFP with a book too. And I was like, girl, we can help everybody. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't even understand. We weren't even in the same state. It just to me, I was like, oh, we'll probably have a lot to talk about. Like I don't know. But I do agree. I think that there are some, especially if you don't feel like if you tried one form of networking or one group or another, I think it's important to try some others, see what fits for you. Maybe you like being in person, maybe you don't. Maybe your people aren't right next to you. Maybe they're not in your house or, right in your community. But I feel like our people are out there.
Well, you have to find your people and don't, if you go to an event and you didn't have a good time or if you didn't meet somebody
Yeah.
spectacular, try a different jam. Find your jam.
Yes. No, I think that's important. I love that idea, and I think that yeah, there is definitely, a lot of work that if we don't see that, that room, like you kind of you build it or you
Yeah.
fix it or you figure it out. So as we, as we wrap up, I do want to talk to you kind of about people who maybe they're thinking about next year. Maybe they want to, put 2024 behind them. They want to kind of start off in a new direction and kind of maybe, put some life back into either a business or an idea. What are some of the ways that they could, reach out to you? What are some of the ways that, that you could help them maybe if they're listening and thinking that this is somebody like you to help them get this organized is what they need. So what would they do to reach out?
Yeah, that's great. So, I love this question because I just at the end of the year, I just started working with two people who I had no one person had met me like 7 years ago and had remembered me and follows me on social. And so I was top of mind for her. And so she literally said, I have this idea. I have no idea if it has value or merit or legs. And I wouldn't even know what to do with it if I tried. But she reached out to me because she said, but 2025 is the year that I want to find out if I sink or swim. And I was thinking, fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, and when I spoke to these two people, one was a little bit further on in her ideation process than the other. Both of them were not near execution, but they reached out to me to get them from ideation to
Mhm.
execution. What I loved about it so much was I love the fact that they said, I've been thinking about this and I've been talking about this, and now it's time to do something about this. And so for me, what I would encourage for anybody who has been sort of stuck in 2024, I mean, let's face it, 2024 was a tough year.
Mhm.
Mentally, just sociologically, like it was a lot. It
Mhm.
was a lot.
What?
I feel that 2025 comes with a real sense of hope, promise, forward thinking. And I really kind of feel like if you've ever wanted to try or explore, do it now. Just, you've got to rip the band-aid off at some time
Yeah.
because you will turn around and 5 years will have gone by and you will have done nothing. And I'm speaking to myself when I'm
Mhm.
talking about this because I have been working on a project and I have been dragging my feet on this project. And I said to myself, 25 is your year to myself. And I'm like, enough talking about it. Like, I am just like the people that I help, right? So
Yeah.
I'm saying it to myself. But if you don't start somewhere, you'll go nowhere.
Hmm.
And you will never know unless you try. And so, why don't you make the promise to yourself? Reach out to me and have a conversation,
Yeah.
and you'll just know, like, will it light a fire under you to go forward and try? I'm not talking about necessarily even going to a full-fledged business model.
Hmm.
I'm just talking about having a conversation with somebody who might be inspirational or helpful or who has contacts in their network to get you even to that next step to even see if this is something that you want to try and do. And that comes in many, many different forms. That could be a job change, a title change within a corporation. That can be an entrepreneurial venture. That could be a side hustle. It doesn't matter. But if you're not going to have an initial conversation, what are we even talking about?
Hmm. No, I agree. And I think that there's a lot of us that maybe did feel a little bit frozen or stuck in 2024, and maybe I just didn't want to do anything, or afraid. So I think that, yeah, 2025 could be the year to kind of work on those projects. I talk to people who regret not writing a book, and I talk to them 20 years later. The thoughts don't go away. They
Nope.
don't. They linger. And then all of the what if scenarios, what if I married somebody? What if I did this differently? What if I so I really do agree with you that like there's no better time.
And
Too easy.
there's no perfect time because if you wait for the perfect time, you'll never nothing is ever perfect. We tried to have a child and it wasn't perfect time and it didn't work and nothing's ever perfect time. It's never a perfect time when you go buy that car. It's never a perfect time when you buy that house. It's you just have to do it or 10 years will have gone by and all that equity that you would have had in your house,
Yeah.
you don't have it. So it's
Mhm.
like you got to do something or else you'll just be left behind by yourself and you'll have nobody to blame but yourself.
Yep, and that's definitely not the position that you want to be in because, yeah, and a lot of times we're tougher on ourselves than anybody else would be. So even getting that idea out of your head and talking
Yes.
to somebody else about it can be really powerful, even to look at things a little bit differently or get asked a question in a different way that you didn't think about. So I definitely believe in the power of coaching and communicating and talking with different people because we can drive ourselves crazy.
Oh, God will spin.
How something can fail,
I'm
like
a
if
big
that's the
spinner. Yeah.
question.
I will spin,
Yeah.
spin, spin. Yeah.
Yeah, no, if that's the question you're asking yourself, like what could go wrong, like your brain will give you all of the answers and more. So, can you tell us what the project is or no?
I've been writing my book forever. And
Your book. People need to read your book.
and they do need to read my book because it will come out and it needs to come out. And if I have one more person say to me, "When is your damn book coming out?" I mean, it's like it's so painful. But look, I got to hold myself to task. So if I'm going to tell other people they have to do it, then I have to do it too. So
See, we all have goals. We all have things that we need to hold ourselves accountable for.
that's
But
right.
this was great. Thank you so much. I'd love for you to share how people can follow you online. I'm sure that people, if they want to reach out to you, or even if they want to just kind of watch behind the scenes while they get to know you better online, how can they find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, I mean, the best way for you to see all things Kim Miles and Miles in Heels Productions would be to go to milesinheels.com. And all my social channels are there. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I will not go down the TikTok rabbit hole because it's a rabbit hole. And I have taken myself off of Twitter just because I think Twitter has really changed.
Yeah.
But I have stayed on Facebook,
Mhm.
LinkedIn, and Instagram. And most importantly, when you go to my website, milesinheels.com, go ahead and subscribe to receive my newsletters. One thing I really pride myself on is that I really only send out things when I actually have something to say. I'm like the least bombarding newsletter you're ever going to get in your email. But it's highly worth it. And a lot of fun sort of surprises coming up in 2025, in addition to the book.
In addition.
So if you want to stay informed, the website's a great way to be involved.
I love that. And I think that's smart way. Like, let's add people to our feeds that provide value, that lift us up, that make us feel like something. I think that if that's one thing that you do in 2025 is clean up some of the places that you don't want to spend time on anymore, you don't want to be, and then start to look for things, people that inspire you or give you good ideas. I think that's super helpful. There's never been more access to really, really valuable information for free than ever. So sign up for the newsletter. I think that's such a smart thing. And if you're looking to catch up on more episodes of the podcast or find a copy of my book, Demystifying Money, please head over to mistylynch.com. I'd love for you to, read some of the comments there and share some of your thoughts. Because I think, yeah, there's a lot of people out here doing amazing things just like Kim. And I think that sometimes even just hearing them share their stories can help you feel a little bit more examples of what's possible for you. If you're somebody who's just not sure what's next, go listen to some other episodes of the podcast. And thank you, Kim, so much for joining. I am so excited to read your book in 2025. I have 3 books to go to get to my 100 book goal this year. So I have a little bit of reading to do, but I love it. I think that everybody needs to, if that's one of the things on your list, I think it's a great thing for people to do is get those books out there. So
Absolutely.
thank
Thank
you
you for
again
having me
for
so
joining.
much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
We'll talk again soon. And thank you for listening. We'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.